When I was learning to sight read at the piano, I felt like my right hand could do okay. But whenever I got to the left hand, oh, it just felt so slow. It felt so hard. And now that I've taught lots of my students to read both left hand and right hand at the piano, I think I've finally figured out what was wrong and what was holding me back. So in this video, I'm going to break down why learning the left hand is so hard. There are actually two problems we need to solve. And then I'm going to show you these three tricks or these three patterns that will help you to completely unlock the left hand. Let's get into it. The problem with reading the bass clef is actually, strangely enough, a psychology problem. What you probably noticed when you were learning to read the right hand and the left hand is that the right hand notes and the left hand notes are different. So here's what I mean. So let's take this second line. This is often where we teach this as the G line because the treble clef kind of swirls around that line, right? So that's the note G right here. Now, if we take that same line on the bass clef, it becomes B. What? Wouldn't it make way more sense if they were the same? Well, unfortunately, they're not. And that creates what we call a interference problem. An interference problem happens when we've learned something, we've learned the notes in the right hand, and then we learn something else that's slightly different, and we sometimes read this left hand, the bass clef, as the right hand. Have you ever had that happen to you? Like you're reading along and suddenly, oh shoot, I realized that I was reading treble clef when I was actually supposed to be reading bass clef. Happens all the time. And so what that does is it makes this right hand, probably because you learned it first, feel the most familiar. And then this bass clef feels really unfamiliar. And so that actually creates the main problem that I see that students have when they're reading the left hand. So what happens is when that left hand feels unfamiliar, it feels uncomfortable to read, students begin to rely on usually just one way to read the bass clef. And often that's a really handy acronym, like for example, all the space notes, probably the most famous acronym in music is what? All cows eat grass, right? The good old A, C, E, G acronym for these notes that are the spaces on the staff. And the problem with that is it makes students very inflexible when they're choosing what strategy to use to read notes on the bass clef. So now I'm going to show you are the three kind of strategies or patterns that you'll need to recognize in order to actually start reading the bass clef a lot faster. Because if I'm always using this acronym, all cows eat grass, which is just fine when you're starting out and you're just trying to figure out where the notes are, the problem is if you use this every time for every single note, it means whenever I read anything up at the top of the staff, I have to go, okay, all cows eat grass. Okay, that's G. Okay, all cows. Okay, that's C. Okay, we've got all cows eat. Okay, so that one's E. But do you see how each time I have to start from the bottom and then work my way up? Or sometimes students will start with middle C, which shows up here, and then they'll count down. And again, the problem is that again, if you're starting from only one place, reading the left hand is going to be so much slower. So how do we fix it? So what I'm going to take you through are the three other strategies or patterns that you should be using to read the left hand besides an acronym or something like that. And what's so great about it is it doesn't require you to memorize anything. All of these strategies are actually really obvious once you see them, and you won't be able to unsee them. So this should really help you out a lot. Okay, so the first strategy is what we call relative reading. And this strategy is going to use the lines and the spaces and kind of the topography or the up and down of the notes to actually figure out what notes are what. So let's start with this, for example. So this clef is often called the bass clef. Another name for it is the F clef. Why? Because maybe it looks kind of like a backwards F. But the reason that I call it the bass clef is because it's got these two dots that are a really great reminder that this line is the F line. So let's say that we know that this note is F. Now, what happens if we go up to this next space? So I'm here on F, and we go up a space. That means I'm going to go up or to the right on the keyboard, just one key. And if I go back down to F, and notice I went down to a line, right? And then what if I went down one more? Then I'll be going down to a space here. And now I'm on E, right? So I was able to do all of this reading, F, G, F, E, without having to figure out, okay, hold on, so this G, okay, oh, it's a space note, so then I've got all cows eat, right? That's like way slower. What would be way faster is just to look at the note and see, oh, okay, how close does it get? So down below in the video notes, I've actually got this handy dandy left-hand sight reading exercises, and I've got all of these different relative reading examples for you to do. And all of these are going to start on C. This is a really great note to kind of start on, so you can kind of start memorizing it and get really comfortable with just recognizing it as C rather than going, you know, all cows. Oh, right, this one's C. Got it? That kind of making sense? So now you might be saying, okay, that's all well and fine if my notes are just moving up and down by one, but what happens if they start moving in larger leaps? So what we're going to do next with relative readings, next we need to recognize the skip. So a skip happens when we go from line, or from space to space rather, or from line to line, like this one does. And whenever we see that, your brain needs to scream, oh, we're just skipping. We're going from C, we're skipping a note, we're skipping this line note, and we're going straight to E. Or we're starting on this D, and we're skipping straight up to F. So the next thing you want to practice is some skips. Now, the next question you might have for me is, hey, Sylvan, okay, so if it moves and skips, that's fine. But what happens if we start jumping bigger spaces? What happens there? So this brings us to the next strategy, which is what I call interval reading. Now, an interval reading is simply knowing the space between two notes. So this interval that I'm playing here on the piano is what we would call a fifth. That's what's written here. And we call it a fifth because it starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's kind of 5 notes that are captured between these two. So we'll call that a fifth. And what's so cool is that each interval has its own special kind of pattern, way that it looks on the page. If you get familiar with these patterns, you'll be able to read any sort of leap anywhere. It's really, really handy. So let's look at this. So for the fifth, for example, the fifth looks kind of like a skip, and then it's going from either a space to a space or a line to a line. It just looks a little bit bigger. So you can kind of guess that if whenever you see this kind of shape, you can guesstimate, you can assume that it's a fifth. And so this exercise is really great at just forcing you to read all of these fifths. And again, you can kind of recognize, basically, I'm kind of combining two strategies here. I'm using relative reading, because we have just this C, D, E, F that's just kind of going up in a straight line. And then we're adding a fifth on top of all of these. So what might have seemed really scary to read at first, with all of these notes going all over the page, is actually really easy if you combine both of those two strategies, reading the fifths, kind of reading the leaps. And then if you can see that these notes are just moving up by 1, oh man, that's going to make your life so easy. Okay, the next interval that's really helpful to know is what we call the fourth. So the fourth is slightly smaller than the fifth, you guessed it. So a fifth was here, and now I have a fourth. And this one looks really weird because it always jumps from a space to a line, or a line to a space. And we can use that same strategy there. You can see how each of these notes is simply moving up by 1, and then we're adding a fourth on top. So we have a fourth, and then I'm stepping up 1, and then stepping up 1. And of course, I'm playing these both at the same time. It's written 1 at a time. Oh man, that makes it so much easier to read, when otherwise it might be like really painful. I hope you're getting this. This is really useful. So then it's not useful to only see music that has just fourths or fifths. So I'm really mean, and I mixed them up. So now we've got different combinations of fourths and fifths in that next exercise. And again, you want to be able to recognize these not when they're all fourths, but when they're all mixed in together. The next interval that you want to read is a sixth. Again, I can kind of keep going here, but this one's, again, similar to the fourth, and that we're jumping from space to line. But it looks really big, doesn't it? Like it has kind of this big gap in it. And again, doing that exercise will be really useful. There's really just one or two intervals left that's really helpful to recognize. One of my favorites is sevenths, because this is where we get into something that's a little bit more jazzy. So if we pick this seventh, for example, ooh, it kind of has a bittersweet kind of tone to it. Now, what's special about these is that these are similar to fifths in that they go line to line, space to space, but doesn't the space feel just huge? It just feels really, really big. So whenever you see that big of a jump, and that it's going from space to space, you could probably assume that it's a seventh, and you'll be right almost every time. And then, of course, we need to mix them up. So I've got some exercises where we mix up fourths, fifths, and sixths. The last one that you need to learn is really, really, really common, which is where we have a octave or an eighth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you'll see that just a couple of these are octave leaps. But for some reason, I find that these are really easy to recognize. It's kind of like, if you see it's jumping up way far, and we've got line to or space to line, or line to space, vice versa, probably most likely going to be an octave. It's actually even more common than the seventh. So it's kind of like if we see a big jump like this, you can almost always assume it's probably going to be an octave, which is really handy to know. So once you've recognized all of these patterns, suddenly reading this, all I need to know, if you have to use all cows eat grass, all you have to do is figure out this first note, and then boom, you can jump off to the races, and you can read the rest of this without having to memorize. Now, one more note on this. I have one more pattern to show you, but I just wanted to say, hey, my name is Sylvan. I love teaching piano, and if you want to get more videos like this, I got lots more strategies, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. But one cautionary note that I did have is that obviously kind of the optimum is that you can recognize each of those notes on the staff kind of based on where they are. That will be the fastest eventually. But the problem is, again, with that interference problem that I mentioned, is that it's going to take a lot longer to memorize that right hand and that left hand because they're similar but they're different. It's so frustrating. And so these strategies are going to help you get over the hump so that you can gradually start memorizing these as you go along. But in the meantime, you'll have multiple strategies, multiple ways to get to the right note. That'll be a lot faster and a lot easier than just using your acronym every time. Does that make sense? Cool, so I have one last strategy to show you. This is my favorite because it can boil down lots of notes to just really, really simple patterns. So this next kind of pattern you need to understand is chords. So what is a chord? A chord is where we play 2 or 3 or more notes at once, kind of creating a harmony. This is kind of the foundation of the melody. While my right hand's playing melody, my left hand is often playing chords. And so what's so useful about understanding how chords work is at first it looks really scary. It looks like there's so many notes on the page. But when you get the pattern of how chords work, this is actually, I think, easier than reading intervals, I think. So let's take this chord, for example. Whenever you see a chord that looks like this, kind of like a snowman, you can always assume that it's going to have this shape on the keyboard, which is play 1, skip 1, play 1, skip 1, play 1. We're kind of making skips out of this. Do you see that? We kind of have 2 skips right here that's making up the chord. And so what's so cool about this is once you know that this is a chord shape, instead of having to read each of these notes, read each of these notes, read each of these notes, the strategy here is just look at the bottom note and do your relative reading from before. That's so awesome. So really all I'm thinking about is I'm starting on C, then I'm going up 1, then up 1, then up 1, then down 1, then down 1, and all I'm going to do is then add that chord shape, that pattern that I know, add it on top of it. So this would be played like this. So we have this first chord, and so this would be played like this. We have our first chord, jump up to our second chord. Look how many notes I'm playing, and man, it is just so easy just to go up and down, kind of noticing the shape. And then the next thing that you'll want to do is be able to recognize when chords move by skips. So see how this one, it skips, so they're all space notes and then all space notes. And then of course I have to mix in a couple of steps to get you used to kind of seeing how these mix together. But again, you'll be able to want to recognize, just like relative reading, how chords will move by skip and by step. And if you want to get really fancy, they can move in larger leaps too, and that's why intervals can be such a big, useful tool as you're navigating the left hand. Now, the next thing you might be saying is, hey Sylvan, not all chords look like that beautiful snowman shape, right? These are snowmen, right? But this one, do you see how it's like a snowman where the head has kind of been raised up just a little bit? But not all chords, you're exactly right, are going to show up in this beautiful snowman format. So what can we do to kind of figure out how, what other shapes that chords will show up in? And so what I like to do when I'm reading chords that look like this is figure out what is similar between these two chords and what is different. So it kind of looks like these two notes are similar, right? These two are staying, and all that's happening is this note is moving from here all the way up here. Now, if you remember from intervals, do you remember what interval this is, going from this note to this note? Remember, it's a really big jump, so it's probably going to be an eighth or an octave. And so that makes it really easy if I just know, okay, I'm really playing just these two notes here in the middle, and then this bottom note is then going to switch up to the top note. Not too bad, right? And then the same thing happens here. Again, we have this octave jump. And by the way, we call these chords that aren't in the snowman shape, we call those inverted chords, meaning they're kind of mixed up. Another great strategy for reading inverted chords is to kind of see chords in pairs that move. So sometimes they'll move like this. Sometimes it's one note that moves. Sometimes it's two notes that move. And so again, I can just use relative reading here. I see, okay, so these two notes kind of move as a unit. They go up one, and then they go down one. Nice. And again, I've kind of mixed up some of these patterns for you in that worksheet. So I hope you find that useful. Okay, finally, we have one more kind of main chord pattern to look at, which is what we call seventh chords. Now, seventh chords are where we're taking our regular chord, and then we're adding an additional note on top of it. So these are 4-note chords, and the reason we call them seventh chords is that there's a seventh here on top. Oh man, and they just have this most beautiful sound. I just love the sound of seventh chords. And again, we can apply all the same strategies to these. They look really intimidating, but all of these, they're all moving up. They're all in like super snowman shape. They're like snowman, but then maybe they have a hat on top, right? And all of these are just going to move up or down by skip or step. Often, obviously, they can move further, but all of these exercises will help you to at least get the relative reading down, which is really helpful. And I just love the sound of these. They're really, really fun. And I write here, play slow, just because as you're learning seventh chords, there's a lot of notes to get under your hand. But again, if you're using this reading strategy, oh man, it's so easy. You just look at the bottom note, okay, it's going up, it's going down, and then as long as they're all in this super snowman shape, they'll just follow along like little ducklings, and you don't have to think too hard about it. It makes all of these notes boil down so much easier. Well, hey, I hope you enjoyed that video. The exercises are down below, and I'll see you on the next one.